Chapter 931. Tang Wuling was quite glad that he'd passed his trial, but he was also rather frustrated that he'd been forced to reveal his bloodline soul rings at such an early state. However, the battles he'd just endured made him feel very good. This sense of pressure was very beneficial to honing his practical combat skills, and the special type of energy he'd absorbed from the barn through his golden dragon spear had also benefited him immensely. In that instant, he felt as if he'd eaten some kind of extraordinary food that had enhanced his body. Due to how powerful his physical constitution currently was, it had been a long time since he'd last experienced such a feeling. Unfortunately, everything was only a simulation. If only such beings existed in real life, he'd be able to continue to bolster his own body by hunting such creatures. He followed the major through the base as he recalled the battles that had just taken place to assess and learn from them. Soon, the major returned to the room where they'd been once before, and they met the lieutenant again. Was the trial completed? That certainly took quite a while. Did he pass? The lieutenant asked with a smile. The major nodded in response. He did. Tang Wuling noticed that they weren't referring to one another by their military ranks during this conversation. What grade did he receive? The lieutenant asked in a curious manner. The major shook her head in response. I'm not sure yet. I'll have to wait for a verdict from the higher-ups. But it's a very high grade. A very high grade? The lieutenant knew this major very well, and she knew that there weren't many people in the entire Blood God Legion that could earn such high praise from her. Just from that alone, she could tell that this handsome young man had thoroughly impressed her. Please take him to collect his things and arrange a temporary place for him to stay for now. We'll find him a more permanent place after a verdict is handed down from our higher-ups. The major said. All right, do you want to take him on a tour so he can get more familiar with our base? He's already a member of our Blood God Legion now, after all. The lieutenant asked with a smile. The major hesitated momentarily, but still nodded in the end. All right, I'll wait for him outside while you complete his registration. After that, she turned and walked away. However, she had only taken a few steps before suddenly stopping and turning toward Tang Wuling again. My name is Long Yakshu. Only then did she exit the room. Long Yakshu. It sounded like a name with a story behind it. 1. Do you like her name? The lieutenant asked with a smile. Tang Wuling smiled, and replied, I do. The lieutenant put on a mysterious expression, and said, she's still single, so you have to work hard. Tang Wuling folded slightly upon hearing this before bursting into laughter. Are you a part-time matchmaker as well? The lieutenant heaved a faint sigh. What can I do? She's my only daughter. Daughter? Tang Wuling was stunned to hear this. Long Yakshu didn't really bear much of a resemblance to this lieutenant. She takes after her father. You must feel like our relationship is a little strange, right? It's actually quite simple. We're in the Legion base here, and during normal work hours, we'll refer to one another by our military ranks. But during breaks, she's still my daughter. All right, that's enough rambling from me. Let's get you registered. We've got your basic information from your invitation letter already. You're Tang Wuling, and you're a student from Shrek Academy's inner court, right? Correct. Tang Wuling nodded in response. The lieutenant continued. You're 21 years old. What rank is your soul power currently at? Please give an honest answer. It's around rank 58. I haven't tested it for a while. Tang Wuling replied in a truthful manner. The lieutenant praised, as expected of a student from Shrek Academy. What about your battle armor? What's its name? Tang Wuling replied, Dragon Moon. You have a suit of 2-word battle armor? The lieutenant's heart jolted upon hearing this. She was beginning to understand why her daughter seemed to be treating him differently compared to other men. She had taken the initiative to inform Tang Wuling of her daughter's single status because Long Yakshu had introduced herself to him earlier. As her mother, she had never seen her do that before. Yes, Tang Wuling replied with a nod. After completing his registration, the lieutenant brought over a few sets of military uniforms before handing them to Tang Wuling. 2 of them were rather thin, while the other 2 sets were thick winter uniforms. That was all that he received. Superior, don't we get any weapons here? Tang Wuling asked. The lieutenant shook her head in response. No one gets anything free of charge here in the Blood God Legion. If you want better weapons and higher military ranks, you'll have to work for all of that. Here in this legion, accolades are the only viable form of currency. He had to accumulate accolades. How was he going to do that? By completing missions. Surely that would be quite a difficult task. In Tang Wuling's mind, it was very unlikely that the evil soul masters of a Holy Spirit cult would be lurking in a place with such a harsh environment. You'll figure everything out soon. Go on now. She's waiting for you outside. The lieutenant urged with a slightly suggestive smile on her face. Tang Wuling smiled and replied, Superior, I already have a girlfriend. The lieutenant faltered slightly before giving a nonchalant shrug. So what? All possibilities are open before marriage. Tang Wuling didn't respond to that. He thumped his right fist against his chest to complete his first official military salute, then stowed his uniforms away into his storage ring before making his way outside. Long Yakshu was waiting outside with her usual cold expression on her face. She turned toward Tang Wuling as he emerged, and said, Come with me. I'll take you to the place that you'll be staying and also give you a brief tour of the base. The weather was still very cold, but this degree of coldness didn't affect Tang Wuling much. The first things you need to know are what places you can't go to. That building over there is the Legion Control Center. Without a sufficient military rank or an instruction from a superior, you're prohibited from entering that place. Over there is the weapons warehouse. It's a restricted zone that you can't enter for no good reason. Those are the barracks, and the training area is over there. Those are the places where you'll generally find the most people. The training area has the most cutting-edge training facilities in the entire Federation, and you can access those facilities at any time, but you have to wear your military uniform. Your uniform has your identification badge within it, and without your uniform, it'll be quite difficult for you to go anywhere in the base. Long Yakshu gave Tang Wuling a very detailed introduction of the base. Superior, I have a question. Can I leave the base as I please? Tang Wuling asked. Long Yakshu stopped and turned around to look at him. Why would you leave the base? Tang Wuling replied. Perhaps I'd like to take a walk outside sometimes. Long Yakshu replied in an indifferent manner. You get no holidays until you become a major, and after you become a major or a higher ranking official, you'll get 1 day's break per week. However, before you leave, you have to hand over all of your weapons, including your mecha, and you'll only be able to leave through your own power. I see. Tang Wuling wasn't concerned about that. Everything would be fine as long as they didn't prohibit him from using his martial soul and battle armor. It was slightly far to be making a return trip to and from the scorching basin in a day, but he'd just have to fly there. However, the major military rank was quite far away from him. According to his understanding of the military, after joining the army, one started off as a rank soldier. There were also second rank and first rank soldiers above this. After that, the progression went second lieutenant, lieutenant, captain, and only after that was the major rank. This meant that he was still 5 or 6 ranks away from his goal. Raising your military rank is pretty easy in the initial stages, especially with your combat prowess. However, before that, you have to undertake a month of special training. This is something that needs to be undertaken by all new soldiers. During this month of training, you'll learn about the Blood God Legion and also what duties you have as a member of the Blood God Legion. Tang Wuling couldn't help but ask, Superior, how long did it take you to become a major? Long Yakshu raised an eyebrow in response. Don't get ahead of yourself. It took me 4 years to get to this rank, and you'll most likely progress faster than I did. But remember not to strive for too many accolades. Most of our young casualties in the Blood God Legion arose as a direct result of this. During your month-long special training, there's a special segment to address that topic. I see. 4 years. He couldn't leave Douluo at the scorching basin for 4 years. What was even more frustrating to him was that there was no signal here for his cell communicator, which meant that he couldn't even contact Douluo right now. Are you in a hurry to leave? Long Yakshu had detected the changes in Tang Wuling's expression. Tang Wuling replied, Not really. I'm just in a hurry to improve. He naturally wasn't going to tell her that he had a girlfriend waiting for him outside the Legion. That would be a major taboo topic in any army. Long Yakshu led Tang Wuling to a barrack before making her way into the building. The interior of the barrack was very clean, and it was entirely constructed from metal. However, as soon as one entered the barrack, they discovered that the temperature was much higher here than outside. It was a very warm and cozy place. This is your room. Everyone gets separate rooms here, and the room you get will depend on your military rank. You're a newbie, so this is the lowest level of accommodation. You'll be able to upgrade once you become a second lieutenant. After that, you'll have to become a major for your next upgrade. The results of your trial will be assessed today, and your special training will commence tomorrow. You can rest for now. Chapter 932. After that, Long Yakshu turned to leave, but Tang Wuling called out after her, Superior, where do I go for food? Long Yakshu asked, Didn't I tell you about the cafeteria? A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. You didn't. Long Yakshu continued, Are you aware of the rule that newbies don't get food to eat? Huh? Tang Wuling stared at Long Yachu in a flabbergasted manner. A legion that didn't feed its soldiers existed. Long Yachu said in an indifferent voice. You have to earn everything here, including even your right to eat. You need to exchange accolades for food. Newbies can take loans, and the amount loaned will be deducted from your future accolades. Tang Wuling's lips twitched upon hearing this. What a strange army this Blood God Legion was. Can I take out a loan from you, superior? Tang Wuling asked. Long Yachu replied, sure, the interest will be 10% per month. Tang Wuling was rendered speechless upon hearing this. That was way too high. However, he still had to eat, so he could only heave a resigned sigh. All right, then I'll take out a loan with you for now. Come with me. It's around time for dinner anyway. The two of them emerged from the barrack, and the cafeteria wasn't far away. After entering the cafeteria with Long Yachu, Tang Wuling was greeted by the sight of the largest gathering of people he'd seen ever since he entered the Blood God Legion base. The cafeteria was very spacious, spanning several thousands of square meters. There were at least 2,000 people dining in here, and even more people were entering and exiting the cafeteria. There were over 10 windows that food could be purchased from, and all of them were simply labeled with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Long Yachu explained. The lower the number of the window, the more expensive the food sold, but those foods will also be more nutritious and enhance one's body the most. Tang Wuling couldn't help but be reminded of the academy's cafeteria rules. However, with his insane past appetite, he didn't really take much notice of all of this. He basically just went to whichever window had enough food for him to eat. Who would have thought that this legion wouldn't even feed him for free? Thankfully, he no longer had the same appetite as he did in the past. Long Yachu led Tang Wuling over the 6th window before lining up. Tang Wuling discovered that the smaller the number assigned to a window, the fewer the number of people that would be lined up there. Windows number 1, 2, and 3 didn't have a single person lined up in front of them, and very few people would purchase food from those windows. Second lieutenants, and captains were the most common demographic in the cafeteria, and he hadn't seen a soldier of his rank yet. As for himself, he hadn't even put on his military uniform yet. Long Yachu was accompanying him anyway, so they weren't going to check his identity. Tang Wuling had been a foodie all his life, so he was very interested in what foods the first 3 windows sold, but he was literally completely broke at the moment, so he could only repress his curiosity. As they were lining up, Tang Wuling asked in a low voice, Superior, does our legion need blacksmiths? Long Yachu glanced at him and replied, Of course we do. Different metals are required to repair mechas and things like that. Why do you ask? Are you a blacksmith? Tang Wuling nodded in response. That's right. Can I earn accolades through forging? Long Yachu replied, You can, but you won't be earning a lot of accolades. Will it be enough to feed me? Tang Wuling asked. Long Yachu scoffed. Are you very worried that you won't have anything to eat? Didn't I lend you some accolades already? You can just repay me after you accumulate some accolades. Tang Wuling didn't explain anything. It wasn't like he could tell her that he wanted to eat food from the better windows, so he merely nodded in response. Yachu. Right at this moment, an alluring voice rang out, and Tang Wuling reflexively cast his gaze toward the direction that the voice had come from. A female captain with a ponytail made her way over to them. Her crisp military uniform complemented her quite well, and in terms of appearance, she was not inferior to Long Yachu, but the lines of her face were slightly softer. She had a pair of large eyes that were shimmering with an impish light, and a rare smile appeared on Long Yachu's face at the side of her. Chi Yue. Jiang Chi Yue turned her attention to Tang Wuling with a curious look on her face, and asked, Why is he not wearing a uniform? Is he new here? He's pretty handsome. Long Yachu nodded in response. He only just arrived and passed his trial today, and he came with me to get some food. Jiang Chi Yue chuckled. You're too kind-hearted for your own good. You gave him a loan on low interest again, right? If you keep breaking the rules like this, the others are going to have something to say. Everyone else charges a monthly interest rate for 100%, but you're only charging 30%. If anyone else were doing what you're doing, those guys would have confronted you already. What? A monthly interest rate of 100% question mark Tang. Wuling's eyes widened upon hearing this. Furthermore, Long Yachu was only charging him a monthly interest rate of 10% rather than 30%. Of course, he wasn't dumb enough to blurt out the truth under such a setting. Long Yachu glanced at Tang Wuling, and a faint blush appeared on her face. The newbies had it hard enough already. We all had to go through the same phase, so why not help them when we can? Jiang Chi Yue turned toward Tang Wuling, and her smile turned slightly suggestive. Hey there, handsome. I'm Jiang Chi Yue. What's your name? Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling replied with a smile. His smile was warm and filled with positive energy, and his large eyes were so clear that they seemed to be reflecting the entire world. Jiang Chi Yue was momentarily entranced by the sight of his smile, and she couldn't help but be stunned by how handsome he was. The Blood God Legion definitely had the highest proportion of handsome men among all of the legions, but all of them were far inferior to this newbie. Even with her critical eye, she couldn't pick out a single problem with Tang Wuling, and this was something that had never happened before. She cocked her head to the side as she turned toward Long Yachu. Interesting. How did his trial go? Long Yachu glanced at her and replied, No. Jiang Chi Yue was quite surprised to hear this. You came with him to the cafeteria, so you must have overseen his trial as well, right? How could you not know how he did? Long Yachu replied, I couldn't give him a grade. The higher-ups are currently assessing the results. Jiang Chi Yue was even more stunned to hear this. He did that well. Long Yachu replied, He definitely did better than you think. Jiang Chi Yue was just about to say something when a boisterous voice rang out from behind her. I don't buy that. The three of them turned to discover a tall and broad male military official making his way toward them. He bore a slight resemblance to Jiang Chi Yue, and he was only slightly shorter than Tang Wuling, but he was extremely muscular. In particular, his freakishly muscle-bound arms were a little scary to look at. Tang Wuling was already quite well built, but this man's physique put him to shame. Brother. Jiang Chi Yue called out before grabbing onto his arm in a wheeling manner. Tang Wuling had also noticed that he was wearing Lieutenant Colonel epaulets. Long Yachu asked, What don't you buy? The Lieutenant Colonel's eyes were clearly filled with some type of deeper emotion as he looked at her. I don't believe that he's as good as you say. What rank do you think he'll be assigned? Second rank soldier? Long Yachu shook her head. First rank soldier? Impossible. The Lieutenant Colonel exclaimed, You should know how difficult it is to be rated as a first-rank soldier. We all know how hard it is for people to be promoted in the Blood God Legion without any accolades under their belts. Long Yachu didn't seem to be very fond of him, and turned away to continue to line up. The Lieutenant Colonel seemed to have already grown accustomed to her attitude toward him, and he turned toward Tang Wuling as he interrogated, What makes Yachu say that you can become a first-rank soldier without earning any accolades? A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Hello, Superior, my name is Tang Wuling. I don't know what the judging criteria are, so I can't really comment on this. Prior to coming here, he had learned the best way to make stable progress in the military from the old demons on the demonic island, and offending a lieutenant colonel on his first day definitely wouldn't be a good idea. I don't believe what she says. What's your greatest strength? The Lieutenant Colonel asked. He displayed no response to the pleasant self-introduction that Tang Wuling had made. Jiang Chi Yue was also appraising Tang Wuling with a curious look on her face. Chapter 933. Tang Wuling's brows furrowed slightly. Could it be that this man was seeing him as a rival in love? He could clearly tell from the way he looked at Long Yachu that he seemed to like her. What had he done to deserve antagonism from him? My greatest strength is strength. Tang Wuling replied in a calm manner. He didn't want to attract trouble, but he certainly wasn't going to allow himself to be pushed around. This was the military, and power was the most important thing here. The Lieutenant Colonel immediately burst into laughter. Strength. That's great. Let's have a little contest of strength. If you can last 3 seconds against me, I'll believe that you have what it takes to become a first-rank soldier. A cold expression appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Why does it matter to me what you think? What do I stand to gain from competing with you? Jiang Chi Yue's eyes widened, and even Long Yachu couldn't help but turn around. There was always the occasional newbie who came in thinking that they were better than everyone else, but almost all of them ended up learning some life lessons the hard way. The Lieutenant Colonel wasn't irked by his cold response. Instead, he appraised Tang Wuling with an intrigued expression, and asked, All right, then what do I have to do to make you agree to this contest? Tang Wuling suddenly smiled. This was a very friendly and benevolent smile, and if any other members of Shrek 7 monsters were here, they'd immediately realized that he was about to screw this man over. The more sinister the scheme he was plotting, the more genuine his smile would be. I'm completely new here, so I don't have any accolades for food. How about we bet on a meal? If I win, I get to eat at whichever window I want until I'm full, and you have to pay for it. The lieutenant colonel sized him up as he agreed. Sure, you have yourself a bet. If you lose, I won't ask too much from you. All you have to do is wash my clothes for a month. Deal? This was indeed quite a low stake, and Tang Wulin's negative impression of this lieutenant colonel improved slightly. At the very least, he wasn't going too far. But did he really know what he was setting himself up for? A hint of sympathy welled up in Tang Wulin's heart. What kind of contest do you propose? That's simple. We'll shake hands, and the first to fold loses. He extended a massive hand as he spoke. Tang Wulin turned to Jiang Qiyue and Long Yakshu as he said, Superiors, would you be able to act as witnesses to this bet? Jiang Qiyue sighed. Washing my brother's clothes for a month isn't a bad thing. My brother can teach you a few tricks that you can use on the battlefield during the process. Tang Wulin smiled. Are you that convinced that I'll lose, Superior? Jiang Qiyue giggled. Looks like you're very confident in yourself. All right, let me get in on this bet as well. If you win, I'll also take care of one of your meals. But if you lose, you have to wash my clothes for a month as well. Of course, that's excluding my underwear. The soldiers that had gathered around to spectate immediately burst into laughter upon hearing this. Tang Wulin wasn't irked in the slightest by this. He merely smiled and said, That sounds great to me. He gripped onto the lieutenant colonel's hand as he spoke. The lieutenant colonel raised an eyebrow and said, Remember my name, newbie. It's Jiang Wuyu. Tang Wulin's lips twitched upon hearing this. Their parents sure were lazy with naming their kids. The literal translation of Jiang Qiyue's name is Zhilai Jiang, while her brother's name, Jiang Wuyu, can be directly translated to Mei Jiang. So they're both named after months of the year. Jiang Wuyu's hand was far larger than Tang Wulin's. Tang Wulin held a slight advantage in terms of the length of his hand and fingers, but Jiang Wuyu's hand was as wide and thick as a bare paw, creating a stark contrast with Tang Wulin's fair and slim hand. The two hands quickly locked onto one another. This is a pure contest of strength, so no using soul power or martial souls. Jiang Qiyue warned as she skipped on the spot in an excited manner. A sly grin appeared on Jiang Wuyu's face as he began to exert force with his hand. Unfortunately for him, he failed to catch sight of the sympathetic look that had flashed through Long Yakshu's eyes. Jiang Wuyu was engaging in a strength contest with a freak whose strength was superior to that of a barn. He really was an idiot. Tang Wulin also wore a smile on his face as he engaged in the handshake. Moments later, Jiang Wuyu's expression began to change slightly. He felt as if he were holding onto an extraordinarily hard piece of uncommon metal rather than a human hand. No matter how much force he exerted, there was no give in Tang Wulin's hand at all, and his expression also remained completely unchanged. There were no soul power fluctuations emanating from his body, so this was definitely his strength alone and nothing else. Could this pretty boy be stronger than him? All of the rowdy soldiers from the Blood God Legion had also begun to quiet down. 3 seconds. More than 10 seconds had already passed. Jiang Wuyu had announced that it would be his loss as long as Tang Wulin could last 3 seconds against him. Among all of the officials of the Blood God Legion that were or below the lieutenant colonel rank, Jiang Wuyu's strength could definitely rank among the top 3. But this newbie was handling his strength with ease. This indicated that his strength was definitely not inferior to that of Jiang Wuyu. Tang Wulin wore an innocent look on his face as he reminded, Superior, 3 seconds have already passed. However, Jiang Wuyu wasn't willing to give up. He exerted his full force with his right hand, and a serious look appeared on his face. The thought of being bested by a newbie in front of so many people was very unappetizing to him. Tang Wulin heaved a faint sigh. He was trying to let Jiang Wuyu down easy, but it seemed like he'd have to teach him a lesson. With that in mind, he finally began to exert force with his hand in retaliation. Jiang Wuyu felt as if his hand had been stuck into a vice that was compressing in a completely irrepressible manner. His strength was nothing in the face of this newbie's vice-like grip. A sharp pain began to spear through his hand, and his face was beginning to turn green. Only then did he realize that this newbie had far superior strength compared to him. Right this moment, the pressure on his hand was alleviated, and Tang Wulin ceased exerting force on his palm. Jiang Wuyu heaved an internal sigh of relief as the pressure was alleviated, and he immediately realized what Tang Wulin was doing. After all, he wasn't really an idiot. He let go first and raised an eyebrow as he said, Very good. You're an exceptional talent to be able to last so long in the face of my strength. I'll make a request to the higher-ups to get you into our first melee combat battalion. He patted Tang Wulin's shoulder firmly as he spoke. He did so with tremendous force, but Tang Wulin merely took it with a smile. Thank you, Superior. Now, about my meal. Tang Wulin prompted. Jiang Wuyu waved a hand in a generous manner. Eat whatever you like. The lower the number on the window, the better the food they sell. I suggest you go and eat from the first window. I lost this bet, so I'll be paying for your meal. This lieutenant colonel had a very straightforward personality, and he was even pointing out where the most expensive food was for him. This made Tang Wulin's impression of him improve even further, but that still didn't mean that he was going to hold back. After traveling for so many days, he didn't have anything good to eat for a while, especially after entering the Sky and Mountain ranges. He'd had nothing to eat but cold dried rations, and the earlier trial had also been quite mentally taxing to him. If there were one word to aptly describe Tang Wulin's current state, then it would be ravenous. Looks like I won't have to borrow accolades from you for now, but thank you for the offer, Superior. Tang Wulin made his way over to the first window as he spoke. Only then did Jiang Qiyue turn to her brother with an inquisitive look in her eyes. All of the spectating soldiers also departed. They were all quite curious about Tang Wulin, but having dinner clearly took priority here. A wry smile appeared on Jiang Wuyu's face. The kid's a freak. He's even stronger than I am. No way. Jiang Qiyue's mouth gaped open as she exclaimed, I recall that your strength had already exceeded 30 tons during your last examination. You didn't hold back, did you? Jiang Wuyu's lips twitched in response. Do I look like the type of guy that would hold back? That kid is a brilliant talent. With his freakish strength, he'd be a brilliant asset to our melee combat battalion. It's decided. I'm going to request him from our higher-ups right after dinner. Don't even think about it. He belongs to our special service department. Long Yakshu counted in a cold voice. Special service department? Jiang Wuyu exclaimed. You also want him. But your special service department does more reconnaissance missions, where long-range battle is more important than melee combat. Do you really have a use for him? Long Yakshu couldn't be bothered to explain anything to him. Instead, she pointed at the first window and said, I suggest you worry about yourself first. Jiang Wuyu reflexively turned toward the first window, and his expression instantly changed drastically. Does this kid have a death wish? He immediately strode toward the first window. One platter after another was being carried out from within the window, and they'd already been arranged into a row on the counter, but there were still more dishes being prepared. Over 10 dishes had already been served. Chapter 934. There was naturally a reason why there were no people lining up at the first, second, and third windows. The accolades in the Blood God Legion were recorded as number values, and one portion of food from the first window cost the same number of accolades one could expect to earn from a low-intensity battle. To put it in simpler terms, the cost of one portion of food from the first window was enough to promote a third-rank soldier to a second-rank soldier. The number of accolades required to promote one up each successive rank was vastly different, but this was still sufficient testament to just how expensive the food at the first window was. Even though accolades were required to purchase food at the cafeteria, there was always enough for everyone, and just one portion of food from the first window was enough to feed a big eater. However, over 10 portions had already been prepared, and even as a lieutenant colonel, this would take a sizable chunk out of Jiang Wuyu's savings. What the hell are you doing? Jiang Wuyu asked in a furious manner. Tang Wulin turned to him with an innocent expression. Superior, didn't you say that I can eat until I'm full? Jiang Wuyu's fury immediately abated slightly. I did indeed say that, but you can't waste food. Don't you know that embezzlement and waste are the biggest crimes? Tang Wulin immediately replied in a serious manner. Don't worry, Superior, I definitely won't waste this. You're telling me you can eat all of this? Let me remind you that the dishes from the first window have spirit items included, so they're extremely nutritious. There's no way that you can eat this much, and even if you can, you'll die from indigestion. Tang Wulin smiled and suggested, how about this, Superior? Let's make another bet. If I can finish all of this, then my next meal. Piss off. I'm not making such a stupid bet with you. Hurry and return all of this food. Zhang Wuyu was starting to get angry now. An indifferent voice sounded from inside the first window. No, returned aloud. Pay up, Battalion Commander Zhang. You said it yourself. You lost the bet, so you have to pay for his meal. Zhang Wuyu's lips twitched upon hearing this. An extremely enormous amount of accolades was required to be promoted from lieutenant colonel to colonel, and he'd already been saving up for more than a year, but he was still only around a third of the way there. This meal alone would cost 10% of all of his savings, so he was naturally very reluctant to pay for it. However, Tang Wuling didn't care about that. He was already digging into his meal while still standing in front of the window. He didn't know what kind of ingredients had been used in these dishes, but they were definitely not inferior to teacher Muyu's cooking. In particular, there was a fowl dish with extremely delicious and juicy flesh, and the soup was so delicious that he almost swallowed his own tongue in his eagerness to gulp it down. Zhang Wuyu reluctantly paid the bill before turning to Tang Wuling with a furious look on his face, but his expression then immediately stiffened. During the time it had taken him to pay the bill, 3 portions of food from the first window had already vanished, and Tang Wuling was working on the 4th dish. That massive bowl of snow spirit bird soup was made using an entire snow spirit bird. One drumstick entered Tang Wuling's mouth right before Zhang Wuyu's astonished eyes, and in the next instant, the bone emerged, completely clean without any flesh hanging to it. The bowl of soup also vanished within the span of just a few breaths. He was eating extremely quickly, but his table manners weren't barbaric at all. Instead, he was like a smooth machine that was working methodically yet rapidly through the food. Before he had a chance to return to his senses, another portion of food had been eaten. Zhang Qiyue and Long Yakshu were also completely flabbergasted. Does this guy have a bottomless pit for a stomach? No matter how handsome he is, no one can afford to feed him. Zhang Qiyue gulped in astonishment. An amused smile appeared on Long Yakshu's face. If I recall correctly, someone stepped in on the bed and promised him another meal. Do you have enough accolades? If not, I'll give you a loan. I thought about what you said, and I decided that you're right. I shouldn't be breaking everyone's rules. Hence, I'll be offering you a loan with a monthly interest rate of 100%. Don't do this, Yakshu. Zhang Qiyue howled with grief. I don't want to go broke. I've been saving up accolades for a long time so I can become a major. My god, where the hell did you find a freak like him? What am I going to do? You have to save me, Yakshu. How about you beg him to let me off the hook? You're the one who brought him in here, so you have to take responsibility. Long Yakshu shrugged in response. You brought this upon yourself. I can't do anything. I suggest you go back and pray for yourself. Zhang Wuyu's jaw had already dropped to the ground after witnessing Tang Wuling consume all of the portions of food that he'd ordered. He was then greeted by the sight of Tang Wuling making his way over to the first window again and asking, "Is there any more?" "That's all we have for today," the chef inside the first window replied. Zhang Wuyu exclaimed, "You can still eat more?" Tang Wuling made his way over to the second window. I guess the second window will do. He hadn't eaten like this in a very long time, and this meal had been extremely enjoyable to him. He didn't want to force Zhang Wuyu into bankruptcy, but he was seriously struggling to control his appetite. The food was fantastic, and there was a sufficient quantity being served. Following the meal, all of his exhaustion had been wiped away. His entire body was feeling very warm and indescribably comfortable. The blood essence vortex on his chest had reached its maximum rotational speed, and there seemed to be a shimmering crystal at its very center. He required a large amount of energy to replenish himself, so the food that he'd just eaten was quickly digested and absorbed. Only after eating more than 10 portions of food from the second window as well did Tang Wuling finally stop. He then gave the dumbfounded Zhang Wuyu a toothy grin. "Thank you, superior." Zhang Wuyu stood rooted to the spot, looking completely defeated. After bidding farewell to Zhang Qiyue and Long Yakshu, Tang Wuling departed from the cafeteria and returned to his living quarters. He was only a soldier, so his room wasn't exactly extremely luxurious. It was only around 10 square meters in size, and the bathroom was also quite crude. However, Tang Wuling was already quite content with this. At the very least, he had a room to himself. Gu Yue, what am I going to do now that I can't contact you? Tang Wuling was feeling rather concerned. What if he had to take 4 years to become a major as well? During the upcoming month-long special training, the first thing that he had to figure out was how to earn accolades. He sat down on his bed with his legs crossed and began to meditate. He had to pour all of his time into cultivation now. After making a breakthrough to rank 60, he'd immediately be able to attain an orange soul ring, and his powers would undoubtedly be significantly enhanced. During his battle against the demonic enchantress earlier today, Tang Wuling had been made aware of his current flaws. He had sufficient strength, but his skills in converting strength to speed were still quite lackluster. He had to improve in that area. Otherwise, his strength would be useless if he couldn't even hit his enemy. Just as Tang Wuling was meditating, there were over 10 people huddled in front of a screen in the third battle room of the Blood God Legion Control Center. The images being displayed on the screen were none other than those depicting the process through which Tang Wuling had traversed through the sky and mountain ranges. Long Yakshu was also present, but she was standing at the back. All of the people who were seated in this room were at least senior colonels, and there were even 2 generals sitting at the front. The 2 of them were both men who appeared to be in their 40s. One of them was very tall and broad with large eyes and thick eyebrows. He was quite intimidating even when sitting still without doing anything. The man beside him was quite tall and slim, and he bore a strong resemblance to Long Yakshu, indicating that the 2 of them were clearly related. His physical constitution is quite good, the burly major general remarked. Long Yakshu replied, "Indeed, I checked the statistics, and it only took him 8 days to get to our base through the sky and mountain ranges, and he didn't use any soul power, nor his martial soul in the process. However, what is it?" The other major general who bore a strong resemblance to her asked. Long Yakshu continued, "However, he seems to possess a type of special power, and I've deduced that it most likely stems from his bloodline. He displayed this power during his trial, and it's very unique, and also very powerful." Chapter 935. The burly major general burst into laughter. "Great. He must be quite a bright young talent to receive such high praise from little Shui. Let's skip this and watch the footage of his trial instead." Long Yakshu stepped forward and brought up another image on the screen. Light flashed, and the scenes depicted now were of her and Tang Wuling in that simulated world. Long Tianwu turned to glance at his daughter with a slightly peculiar look on his face. He'd heard from his wife that their daughter had overseen this newbie's trial in person, and had given him the highest praise. Only the newbies that were given such glowing praise were worthy of having so many high-ranking military officials assess their trial footage to determine their grade. The image began to change, and Long Yakshu and Tang Wuling jumped into the abyss one after another. Tang Wuling walked up ahead with purple light occasionally flashing through his eyes. He was recommended here by the Tang sect, but he comes from Shrek Academy. Looks like there were survivors from Shrek Academy after all. Long Tianwu mused as his eyes narrowed slightly. That does appear to be so. Major General Shu Weitao nodded, and said, "Who would have thought that such a major disaster would befall Shrek City?" After we received the news, it took a lot of convincing to prevent the Shrek Academy alumni among our ranks from storming back to Shrek City. Looks like the continent is going to be plunged into turmoil soon. Long Tianwu nodded in response. Things definitely aren't as simple as they seem, and in my opinion, the military isn't entirely innocent. Our Legion commander has already gone to the military headquarters. He should bring back some more specific details for us. I hope the military wasn't actively involved in this. Otherwise, I would be severely disappointed. How could they weaken the continent like this by targeting Shrek Academy and the Tang sect? Shu Weitao sighed. There must be some people of the opinion that our Douluo continent is already powerful enough for global conquest. Shrek Academy has always been a neutral entity, so it'll always be a thorn in the side for the overly ambitious figures on the continent. No matter what happens, this can't just be allowed to pass. We'll wait for a verdict from the Legion commander. Just as the 2 major generals were speaking, a startling turn of events had already unfolded within the image on the screen. Long Tianwu was the one who had uttered that faint cry of surprise as Long Yakshu was suddenly running toward the center of the cave. Wasn't she artificially increasing the difficulty of this trail? They were then greeted by the sight of Tang Wuling following close on her heels, waving his staff through the air and killing one four-clawed bat after another. He has brilliant melee combat skills that are enhanced by the Tang sect's ghost shadow perplexing track, and he's very calm and steadfast. It's quite remarkable that a 21-year-old like him is able to do all of this. On top of that, he possesses immense strength. He's only using a metal staff, but he's killing those four-clawed bats with ease. With the skills that he's currently displaying, he's at least good enough to become a second-rank soldier. Long Yakshu didn't say anything, and the image changed again as the 6th clawed bat emerged before pouncing directly toward Tang Wuling. Serious expressions appeared on the faces of Long Tianwu and Shu Weitao in response. Six-clawed bats were more than 10 times more powerful than their four-clawed counterparts, and they also possessed sound wave attacks that had caused a lot of trouble for the Blood God Legion in the past. Wide-range attacks like those were very annoying under many circumstances. In the next instant, Long Tianwu's expression stiffened slightly as he witnessed Tang Wuling catching Long Yakshu in a tight embrace before destroying the six-clawed bat. Long Yakshu blushed slightly as she explained, "He possessed immense spiritual power, and he used that to protect me from the sound wave attacks." Long Tianwu didn't say anything. For him to be able to kill a six-clawed bat with just his strength alone definitely placed him among the best newbies that he'd ever seen. However, the events that unfolded next gradually cast them into a higher and higher degree of astonishment. After the three six-clawed bats fell by Tang Wuling's hands, the military officials sitting behind the two major generals were beginning to rise to their feet, and loud conversations quickly rang out. Immediately thereafter, Tang Wuling fell backward along with Long Yakshu before lashing out with a kick that could only be described as the perfect culmination of exemplary technique and terrifying power. The giant snake was sent flying as a result, and two of the senior colonels present also couldn't help but rise to their feet. Nicely done. Is that a barn? Why would a barn appear in a trial like this? The difficulty is way too high. What a shame. I wanted to see more of what the little guy was capable of. Even Long Tianwu and Xu Wei Tao's brows had furrowed slightly at the sight of the gigantic paw that had just appeared. It's not over yet, superiors. Long Yakshu couldn't help but interject. It still wasn't over, but this was a barn. They were then greeted by the sight of Tang Wuling besting barn in melee combat. This was the purest clash of strength. But what were those golden rings of light? After the barn was pinned to the rock face by the golden dragon spear, the entire battle room had fallen completely silent. He had no access to his martial soul or soul power, but he managed to kill a barn in a one-on-one battle. He didn't even have access to his battle armor or a mecha. Had he achieved all of this with just his strength and bloodline power? It would be a severe understatement to refer to him as a prodigy at this point. There were very few people present, even among the senior colonels, who could accomplish the same feat. This is extraordinary. Xu Wei Tao muttered under his breath. A demonic enchantress. Long Tianwu abruptly rose to his feet as the footage still hadn't concluded. That demonic enchantress had finally appeared. After that, the scenes of Tang Wuling battling the demonic enchantress and protecting Long Yakshu with his own body in the end set the atmosphere and the entire battle room alight. The next morning, after Tang Wuling awakened from his meditation, the sky was still pitch black outside. The days here were clearly far shorter than the nights. Tang Wuling passed his gaze out toward the world of ice and snow through the window while he basked in the comforting warmth of his own room, and he kind of enjoyed this feeling. He had distanced himself from all of the chaos on the continent, and the burden on his shoulders had been significantly lessened. He still couldn't completely put down those burdens, but at the very least, he didn't have to worry about all that pressure for now. His initial impression of the Blood God Legion was quite positive, and the amorous Douluo had to have his reasons for sending him here. His two objectives for this stint of military service were to grow stronger and also accumulate influence in the military. It was undoubtedly the case that the Blood God Legion was quite isolated from the Federation, and it was almost a completely independent entity. It wasn't a neutral entity like Shrek Academy, but it was most likely quite a high-ranking organization nonetheless. As for why the Blood God Legion was situated here, the amorous Douluo didn't provide any explanations. He merely told Tang Wuling that he'd soon be able to figure things out for himself. The massive feast that he'd enjoyed the night before had replenished his body to a great extent, and not only was he feeling completely reinvigorated, his blood essence had been bolstered yet again. After getting up and doing some stretches, Tang Wuling brushed his teeth before exiting his room. In the early hours of the morning, the temperatures on the sky and mountain ranges were extremely low, and even Tang Wuling couldn't help but shudder. He had already put on his white military uniform, and it fit him very well, complementing his tall and well-built figure, as well as his handsome appearance. This was going to be the day on which his special training commenced, and he was wondering what the training would entail. After enduring the training on the demonic island, Tang Wuling wasn't concerned in the slightest about the special training that the Blood God Legion would throw at him. What could be more torturous than the experiences he'd suffered on the demonic island? The distant sky was rather murky as the air was filled with powdered snow. It was a pity that he didn't possess an ice attribute martial soul. Otherwise, his cultivation would benefit immensely under such an environment. Right at this moment, a pleasant voice sounded. Tang Wuling. Good morning, superior. Tang Wuling turned to discover that it was Long Yakshu, and he asked, "Do you live near here as well?" Long Yakshu shook her head. "No, I don't live in this area. I'm here for you. Your trial has been graded, and I'll take you to accept your military rank after breakfast. At the same time, the department that you'll be going to will be announced." "Yes." Tang Wuling bumped his fist into his chest as a military salute. Long Yakshu stepped forward and laid her left hand on his elbow while adjusting the position of his arm with her right hand. "Your fist should strike slightly above your heart. Understood? Understood. Let's go get some breakfast first. By the way, Qi Wei wants me to beg you to let her off the hook." Even Long Yakshu herself was quite amused as she spoke. Thinking back to the pitiful, beseeching display Zhang Qi Wei had put on the night before, she was struck by a rather twisted sense of satisfaction. "Oh, sure thing. I'll just eat one portion of food then," Tang Wuling replied. "How can you eat that much?" Long Yakshu couldn't help but ask. Tang Wuling replied, "Well, I guess it's a talent of mine. I don't actually have to eat that much all the time, but eating more is beneficial to my cultivation." Long Yakshu turned to him with a surprised expression. "You can cultivate through eating? That's related to your bloodline ability, right?" Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly, but he still nodded in response. They met Zhang Qi Wei at the cafeteria again, but as opposed to her energetic and impish appearance from the day before, she had braided her hair into twin pigtails today, and she also wore a pitiable look on her face in a display of vulnerability. Tang Wuling couldn't help but chuckle internally upon seeing this. Such crude tactics weren't going to work on him. He's seen absolutely everything from the 7 old demons of the demonic island. Of course, he wasn't going to actually call her out for this. Chapter 936. Good morning, superior. Tang Wuling extended a military salute toward Zhang Qi Wei. Zhang Qi Wei hurriedly said, "We're all comrades and friends here, so there's no need to refer to me as superior. We're not on a mission or anything, so just call me by my name." "So, about the bet," Tang Wuling said, "I'll make do with a portion of food from the 6th window. I had a lot to eat last night and all that food still hasn't really digested." "Really?" Zhang Qi Wei's large eyes immediately lit up as she turned to Long Yakshu with a grateful expression. Long Yakshu said, "Don't thank me. He was the one who agreed to this." Zhang Qi Wei immediately latched onto Tang Wuling's arm in an excited manner. "Thank you, handsome." Her figure was far more significantly developed in certain areas, and Tang Wuling was immediately struck by the feeling of something soft making contact with his arm. A wry smile appeared on his face as he extricated his arm out of her grasp in an inconspicuous manner. "It's all right. I wasn't really going to eat that much this morning anyway. Please look out for me in the future, superior." Zhang Qi Wei's expression changed ever so slightly. She had naturally noticed Tang Wuling struggling out of her grasp, despite how subtle he was being. After breakfast, Long Yakshu took Tang Wuling to the Blood God Legion Control Center. His inauguration ceremony was going to be held here. This was one of the rules of the Blood God Legion. The control center was very neat and clean without any ornamental embellishments, and everything looked just as cold as the snow and ice outside. The inauguration ceremony was going to be held in a small hall that could house around 100 people. By the time Tang Wuling and Long Yakshu arrived, a dozen or so people were already waiting for them, and their epaulets were absolutely dazzling. There were 2 generals among them, and the rest were all colonels or above. Tang Wuling discovered that all of them were looking at him with a lot of intrigue in their eyes, and that was obviously due to the bloodline power he displayed during this trial. However, Tang Wuling didn't pay any heed to this. The trial prohibited the use of soul power and soul skills, so it was most likely designed to test for certain qualities outside of power among the newbies, such as their willingness to sacrifice themselves for the sake of their comrades. Following his training on the demonic island, Tang Wuling had actually already deduced this back when Long Yakshu had told him that his objective was to protect her during the trial. Even so, he had still unleashed his bloodline power, and this was naturally done for a purpose. He hadn't held back as he wanted to integrate himself with this legion as quickly as possible, and displaying his powers was undoubtedly the best way to accomplish this. As such, he had anticipated the scrutiny he was receiving. Long Yakshu asked Tang Wuling to stand off to the side before making her way over to the military officials and extending a military salute. "Vice Commander of the Special Service Department, Long Yakshu, reporting for duty with new soldier Tang Wuling. Please give us instructions." Long Tianwu said, "You may begin." "Yes." Long Yakshu turned to Tang Wuling and said, "New soldier Tang Wuling, please step onto the stage for your inauguration." Tang Wuling strode to the center of the stage at the front of the hall, then thumped his right fist against his chest as a military salute to all of the officials present. Long Tianwu stood up and stepped forward while Long Yakshu carried a platter over to them. There were 2 epaulets on the platter, as well as a pair of golden lapel pins. 1 line and 1 star. Didn't that represent a second lieutenant rank? Tang Wuling couldn't help but falter slightly at the sight of the epaulets. Wasn't he only supposed to be a soldier? He had thought he had a good chance of becoming a first-rank soldier based on his performance, but he didn't think that he'd become a second lieutenant right away. The second lieutenant rank was above the 3 soldier ranks, and the main difference between the two was that a second lieutenant was a true military official while a soldier was just a soldier. As such, it was quite extraordinary for him to be granted this rank right away. The higher the starting point, the faster the progress that would be entailed. Long Tianwu turned to Tang Wuling and said, Tang Wuling, we've seen your trial footage, and you performed exceptionally well. We were truly astonished by what you were capable of even without using your soul power. According to the rules of the Blood God Legion, exceptional new soldiers can become first-rank soldiers, but based on your scintillating performance, the Legion has decided to make an exception and reward you with this second lieutenant military rank. We hope you can keep this up and continue to strive for greater accolades. Yes. Tang Wuling replied in a firm voice. Long Tianwu put on his epaulets and lapel pins for him in person. Following the addition of those accessories, his pristine white military uniform had transformed once again, making him look as if he were brimming with heroic spirit. Second Lieutenant Tang Wuling, you'll be assigned to the Special Service Department as an advisor. You'll immediately adopt your role after a month-long period of special training. From that instant onward, Tang Wuling became a second lieutenant advisor of the Special Service Department. This meant that he'd officially joined the federal military and become an official soldier, as well as a military official. A brand new world was opened up to him. But what exactly did a second lieutenant advisor do? Tang Wuling wasn't really sure. However, he was presumably going to have his duties made clear to him during the coming month. Seeing as he'd been assigned to the Special Service Department, the Vice Department Commander, Long Yakshu, was going to be a colleague of his. Following the inauguration ceremony, Long Yakshu and Tang Wuling departed from the control center. Superior, does my special training begin now? Tang Wuling asked. Long Yakshu nodded in response. I will be your instructor for the coming month, and you'll listen to everything I say during your special training. Firstly, I'm going to fill you in on some theoretical knowledge. Much to Tang Wuling's surprise, Long Yakshu didn't take him to a classroom or anything like that. Instead, she brought him to a 2-room dormitory suite, and no matter how he looked at it, this place seemed to be Long Yakshu's personal living quarters. Take a seat, this is my dormitory suite, Long Yakshu said in a nonchalant manner. Tang Wuling didn't ask any questions, and he sat down on the couch in the guest hall. Long Yakshu said, you're the only newbie, so we don't need to go anywhere special. You have to make sure to commit everything I tell you next to memory. Yes, superior. Long Yakshu glanced at him and said, there's no one else around, so you can refer to me by my name. We'll be colleagues from now on. Is that a good idea? Tang Wuling was rather hesitant. A cold look appeared on Long Yakshu's face. That's an order. All right then. Long Yakshu continued. You must be curious about why our legion is situated here in the Sky-and Mountain Ranges, where the terrain is so precarious and the conditions are so harsh, right? Tang Wuling nodded in response. The Sky-and Mountain Ranges was situated on the westernmost region of the continent, and according to the map, after passing over the Sky-and Mountain Ranges, one would quickly be able to reach the western shore. That was the most bleak and barren place on the entire continent, and that was exactly because it was separated from the rest of the continent by the Sky-and Mountain Ranges. Compared to the other regions of the sea surrounding the continent, there weren't many sea soul beasts beyond the western shore, and there were no humans living over there at all. But no matter how one looked at it, the Blood God Legion was one of the most elite legions out there. Why had such a powerful legion been placed here? Tang Wuling was also very curious, and now, Long Yakshu was finally going to reveal the secrets of the legion to him. Long Yakshu explained, the Blood God Legion was founded 6,300 years ago, yet there are extremely few people on this continent who are aware of our existence as we're different from normal legions. We all have a unique responsibility and burden on our shoulders, and the men and women of the Blood God Legion have been protecting the entire Douluo continent behind the scenes for generation after generation. Tang Wuling listened with rapt focus. A reminiscent look appeared in Long Yakshu's eyes as she continued. We are guarding this place as a massive disaster once took place here. You should be aware of the fact that these mountain ranges didn't belong to the Douluo continent once. Instead, they became connected to our continent due to the continental shift connecting the Sun-Moon continent to ours, which means that this place once belonged to the Sun-Moon continent. After the connection between the two continents, our Douluo continent almost doubled in size to what it is now. Around 10,000 years ago, a war finally broke out due to various differences in culture and ideals, and in the end, the entire continent was unified. After that, the current federation slowly took shape. Perhaps the clash between the two continents warped space in a strange way, but a peculiar spatial passageway appeared within the Sky and Mountain Ranges. To put it in simpler terms, a new space was connected to our continent. There are many other worlds in outer space, and on many of those planets are different life forms. This spatial passageway can shorten the distance from one world to another, and it can even connect two worlds situated trillions of kilometers apart. Thus, beings on the other side of the passageway would be able to reach our world in a very short time. Are you following what I'm saying right now? I am. Tang Wuling nodded in response. After his trip to the Dragon Valley, he had developed a certain level of understanding of spaces and worlds outside of the Douluo star. Chapter 937. Long Yakshu continued. In the beginning, the spatial passageway in the Sky and Mountain Ranges was very small, and this place is obviously extremely secluded, so no one discovered it. However, as time passed, the passageway widened, and living beings from another plane began to enter our Douluo continent through it. We refer to these living beings as abyssal creatures. Tang Wuling's pupils abruptly contracted drastically upon hearing this. Are you telling me that the beings we encountered during my trial actually exist? Are they the abyssal creatures you're talking about? Long Yakshu commended. That's very smart of you to make the connection so quickly. That is indeed the case. 6,300 years ago, vast hordes of abyssal creatures entered our continent through the Sky and Mountain Ranges, and a massive tragedy ensued. However, the disaster took place in such a secluded region with barely any human population, and the Federation kept the incident strictly confidential, so very few people are aware of what happened. Abyssal creatures are characterized by their abilities to destroy and devour. They'll devour all life forms, regardless of whether they're plants or animals, and they're like locusts in that they ravage lands until they're completely barren and desolate. All of them are completely deranged creatures, and it only took them a short time to wipe out all of the living beings in the Sky and Mountain Ranges. Thankfully, human technology was already quite advanced at the time, and the Federation was able to discover their existence before the disaster could spread further into the continent. The Federation then deployed almost 2/3 of the entire military to hunt down these abyssal creatures. With the assistance of Shrek, Academy, the Tang Sect, the Spirit Pagoda, and the Battle God Hall, the Federation deployed 11 mega legions and used countless spirit missiles to finally drive these abyssal creatures back into the passageway. More than 200,000 people perished during that war, and even the palace master of the Tang Sect's Douluo palace at the time perished during a battle against one of the abyssal emperors. 4 of Shrek's 7 monsters also passed away, along with 10 of the 18 battle gods of the Battle God Hall. On top of that, 3 of the 4 spirit envoys of the Spirit Pagoda were also killed, and among the 3 chairmen, one of them perished while the others sustained severe injuries. It was an extremely tragic war. Tang Wuling drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. Looking at the 4 super organizations now, it was quite apparent how powerful they would have been in the past. According to Long Yakshu's description, there had to have been at least 30 titled Douluo who participated in that war, and 6,300 years ago, battle armor had already been invented. They weren't as powerful as they were now, but there wouldn't be too much of a disparity. Despite that, so many powerful beings had perished during that war, and that was more than sufficient testament to just how fearsome these abyssal creatures were. Tang Wuling thought back to the demonic enchantress he'd encountered in that simulated world, and he felt as if his heart had been filled with lead. The sacrifices made by our predecessors weren't in vain. The abyssal creatures were forced back to their original plane, and 5 of their 7 abyssal emperors perished during that war. The leader of the 7 abyssal emperors was also severely wounded in the face of the combined efforts from the master of the Tang Sect's Douluo palace, the master of Shrek Academy's Sea Gods Pavilions, and the leader of Shrek's 7 monsters at the time. Countless other abyssal beings were also slain in the process. After that, our predecessors forcibly sealed the abyssal passageway, and it wasn't completely sealed shut, but it was extremely difficult for abyssal emperors to pass through it. It was also during that time that the Blood God Legion was founded. The Legion was founded by the 4 super organizations, and they only had one objective: to guard the passageway and keep out the abyssal creatures. We don't know where the abyssal creatures live, but they're extremely powerful. The demonic enchantress that you encountered is an abyssal monarch, while that massive barn is only an abyssal master. During the past 6,300 years, the abyssal creatures have constantly been trying to invade our world, and we've been doing everything in our power to keep them at bay. Tang Wolin said, our accolades earned through battling these abyssal creatures? Correct. Long Yachu replied, the cave you saw during your trial simulates an actual abyssal cave, and the situation there also simulates the reality within the abyss. Due to the spatial passageway fluctuations within the abyss, our martial souls are severely debilitated there. We can still use them to some extent, but it really is very close to not being able to use them at all, and that's why you weren't able to use soul power during your trial. We've invented some spatial shielding devices, but those can only allow us to use our martial souls for short periods of time. Tang Wolin nodded in response. I see. Does this mean that I'll have to battle abyssal creatures following my special training? Does the number of abyssal beings I kill directly correspond to the number of accolades I'll earn? Long Yachu nodded, and replied, theoretically, yes, but you're in the special service department, so your duties will be different from those who fight at the front lines. Tang Wolin immediately said, Superior, can you transfer me to a department that would allow me to fight on the front lines? Long Yachu raised an eyebrow slightly upon seeing the scorching battle intent in Tang Wolin's eyes. Compared to handsome pretty boys, she was far more appreciative of powerful and courageous warriors, and it was undoubtedly the case that Tang Wolin possessed all of the aforementioned qualities. During the trial, everything in the simulated world was virtually the same as it was in the real world. In particular, when facing that demonic enchantress in the end, it was so fast that there was virtually no time for them to think. Even so, Tang Wolin was still able to use his own body to protect her, and that was sufficient testament to his courage and willingness to sacrifice. As such, Long Yachu had no doubt that Tang Wolin was being completely genuine in his request. It's not what you think. Compared to the battle units, we'll actually have more chances to encounter abyssal creatures. Do you know what duties our special service department is responsible for? Long Yachu asked. Tang Wolin shook his head. Long Yachu continued. Our special service department is mainly responsible for undertaking various types of missions. You saw how I was guarding the outskirts of the Legion base on the day that you arrived. At the time, I was substituting for one of my friends. Under normal circumstances, that's not part of my job. Our most important missions are reconnaissance and to provide all types of information and biological samples for our research department. The battle units have to substitute everyone once in a while in order to replenish their supplies, and it's not like abyssal creatures are constantly pouring into our world. The main duty of the battle units is to keep abyssal creatures from coming out of the abyssal passageway, rather than actively hunt them down. However, our special service department is different. Due to the nature of our duties, we'll enter the places that are closest to the spatial passageway, and some missions will even involve traveling to the abyssal plane in order to collect more information. If you can discover a new species of abyssal creature and return to the base with a corresponding biological sample, you'll receive a lot of accolades for that. As such, if you want to progress up the ranks quickly, our special service department is definitely the best place for you in the fledgling phase of your military career. Tang Wolin asked in a curious manner, why only the fledgling phase? Long Yachu explained, prior to reaching a certain military rank, personal accolades are extremely important for progression, but after becoming a lieutenant colonel, your leadership abilities will also be taken into consideration, as high-ranking military officials must possess a certain level of leadership skills. Otherwise, they won't be granted any promotions. Even if they did get promoted to higher ranks, they'll be more like advisors and won't be able to directly lead the army. Zhang Wuyu was originally placed in the special service department, and only after becoming a major was he transferred over to a battle unit. He then took 2 years to become a lieutenant colonel, so he's been accumulating accolades very quickly. If I had made that bet with you in his place last night, I wouldn't even have enough accolades to pay for your feast. Tang Wolin's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, so you're saying that it's best for me to become a major here in the special service department, then transfer to a battle unit, right? Chapter 938. That's right, this is the quickest way to accumulate accolades. Of course, not everyone has to follow this path. Everything also depends on our own abilities. We've already conducted a preliminary examination of your abilities during the trial, and in the coming month, I'll be assessing your abilities even further in order to be able to assign you the missions that will suit you the most. The main advantage of our special service department over the battle units is that we can enter the abyssal passageway to conduct missions and battle whenever we want. I understand now. Tang Wolin nodded in response. Following Long Yachu's introduction, he'd finally gained a rough understanding of the Blood God Legion. The existence of the abyssal plane naturally evoked a grim feeling in his heart, but it also presented him with an opportunity. During his battle with the barn, his golden dragon spear had devoured its energy, and that had been immensely beneficial to his bloodline. As such, it appeared that even though abyssal creatures were filled with destructive intent, the energy within their bodies was very pure, and he could absorb this energy for himself after it was extracted and purified by his golden dragon spear. Under normal circumstances, there was no way that his golden dragon spear would be able to absorb the life force of other living beings to assist him in his cultivation. That didn't work with humans, and there weren't any soul beasts for him to kill, so neither of those options were viable. However, in the face of these destructive abyssal creatures that were endangering the entire human world, Tang Wolin had no such qualms. Through his battles with abyssal creatures, he could use his golden dragon spear to absorb their energy into his own body. This didn't enhance his soul power much, but it was considerably beneficial for his bloodline power, and it was even comparable to consuming spirit items. Where else could he find such a brilliant opportunity? Being part of the Blood God Legion naturally placed him in more danger than if he were in another legion, but it also presented him with a brilliant opportunity. From a money-saving perspective, if he could continue to enhance himself by absorbing the energy of these abyssal creatures, he may even be able to break his future golden dragon king seals without having to purchase any spirit items for consumption. This was an extremely rare situation for him, as he always had to face an extremely massive risk whenever he broke one of those seals. Furthermore, the second 9 golden dragon king seals were far more perilous than the previous 9, and he had no idea what to expect. Only after breaking his 10th seal would he be able to gauge just how fearsome the rest of the golden dragon king seals would be. Old Tang had been hibernating this entire time, and he'd prepared most of the spirit items required to break the 10th seal. Furthermore, he had also eaten close to a third of a singular velvet sky chrysanthemum, but he was still feeling rather concerned. After all, breaking the 10th seal was most likely going to result in a qualitative change in his bloodline power. However, at the same time, he was also very much looking forward to the power that he'd attain from it. If he could achieve his objective by absorbing the energy of abyssal creatures, then that would naturally be ideal. The amorous Douluo really had sent him to a great place. Not only could he gradually accumulate more influence in the military here, he could also continue to improve himself. The 18 golden dragon king seals had made him who he was today, but they were also like sharp swords that were constantly hanging over his head. What would happen if he were to absorb all of the golden dragon king essence within those 18 seals someday? The existence of the abyssal plane undoubtedly provided him with an opportunity to find this out for himself. All 4 of the super organizations on the Douluo continent had been severely ravaged during the war against this powerful plane, so there had to be countless abyssal creatures in existence. What he needed the most now was power. What are you thinking? Long Yachu suddenly asked. Only then did Tang Wolin return to his senses, and he replied, I'm thinking about how I can fight these abyssal creatures as soon as possible. Long Yachu said in a serious voice, you are indeed quite powerful, but I must remind you to constantly keep your ego in check. The abyssal creatures are more fearsome than you can imagine, and battles in the real world are different from those in simulations because you don't get a second life. Do you understand? Yes, Tang Wolin replied with a nod. Long Yachu's expression eased slightly, and she continued, now, I'm going to tell you about the information that we currently have on the abyssal plane, as well as all of the species of abyssal creatures currently known to us. Long Yachu was a very good instructor, and she provided very detailed information to Tang Wolin. Tang Wolin was also a very keen student, and he'd immediately raise any questions that he had, all of which would be answered by Long Yachu. The more he learned about the abyssal plane, the more awestruck Tang Wolin became by how noble the Blood God Legion was. According According to Long Yakshu, less than half of the soldiers in the Blood God Legion managed to survive here for more than 10 years. Even though human technology was constantly advancing, and they were growing more and more experienced in combating the abyssal plane, casualties were still unavoidable. The sudden fall of Shrek Academy also dealt an extremely heavy blow to the Blood God Legion, as Shrek Academy had been a prominent source of new soldiers for the Legion. Without this source of support, the Blood God Legion faced the risk of waning in power in the future, and it was hard to say whether they'd be able to continue to guard the continent against the abyssal plane. Even though the Battle God Hall and Spirit Pagoda could continue to provide them with new troops, this would entail that the Blood God Legion could very likely gradually fall under the control of one of those two organizations someday, and that was definitely not something the higher-ups of the Legion wanted to see. The purpose of the Blood God Legion was to protect the Douluo continent, not to become a weapon of any organization. At the same time, Tang Wuling learned that all of the equipment and facilities of the Blood God Legion were virtually the most advanced that the human race was currently capable of creating. If one wanted to join the Blood God Legion, they had to at least be a 4-ring soul ancestor. Even the strictest of sects wouldn't set such a high barrier for entry, let alone any other legion. Furthermore, they had to be a soul master, rather than purely a soul guide master. During battles against abyssal creatures, weapons would only prove to be accessories most of the time. If one weren't powerful enough without their weapons, then they'd eventually perish in battle. Waging battles at such a high altitude and under such cold conditions for extended periods of time was an extremely stern test of one's power and mental fortitude. As such, less than half of the soldiers managed to successfully complete their full military service stints here, but most of them were actually disqualified in advance as they couldn't take this lifestyle anymore. Disqualification was different from retirement. Retired military officials from the Blood God Legion were exceptional military personnel that all other major legions would welcome with open arms, but those who were disqualified had no right to proclaim that they'd once been a part of the Blood God Legion. 10 years was a very long time, and many major families would try everything they could to get their most exceptional young talents into the Blood God Legion. They were doing so in order to put these young talents through a trial by fire. If they could complete the 10 years of military service, then there was a very good chance that they'd become pillars that the entire family could rely on in the future. Among the higher-ups of the federal military, there were many from both the Eagle faction and the Dou faction who had once served in the Blood God Legion. The current federal military minister had never served in the Blood God Legion, but his son was serving in the Blood God Legion right now. Even though Long Yakshu hadn't put it in such blunt terms, Tang Wuling could read between the lines and deduce from her words that the Blood God Legion was a cradle for the higher-ups of the military. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had to be able to survive for the entire duration of the military service. 10 years. Tang Wuling couldn't help but heave an internal sigh. The amorous Douluo had most likely sent him here so that he'd have enough time to accumulate power and influence. What kind of heights would he scale to within 10 years? Tang Wuling clenched his fists tightly and set a goal for himself. During these 10 years, he was going to become a high-ranking commander no matter what. At the same time, he had to reach the title Douluo level during this time. Chapter 939. During the next week, Tang Wuling learned all types of information about the Abyss under Long Yakshu's tutelage. An entirely different race from another plane was involved here, so there were many things that he had to learn. For example, he had to learn about the species in this race, their innate abilities, and their battle styles, as well as all of the important details about battling in the abyssal passageway. However, this type of special training was extremely easy for Tang Wuling, and with his memory and comprehension abilities, he was able to absorb all of this knowledge very quickly. Much to Long Yakshu's surprise, not only was Tang Wuling freakishly strong and extremely handsome, his thought processes were also very clear. He could always immediately commit everything she said to memory and even make deductions on his own, as well as raise some questions that even she had never considered before. There were some things that she had to consult her father about before being able to provide him with the correct answer. During this week, the two of them also became quite familiar with one another. At the same time, Tang Wuling also gained a better understanding of the current situation of the Blood God Legion. The Blood God Legion was referred to as a legion, but it actually only had enough soldiers to fill 2 divisions. One of them was known as the Blood Division, which entailed an unyielding spirit and the willingness to fight until the very last drop of their blood ran out. They were mainly responsible for direct battle against the abyssal creatures, and the commander of the Blood Division was Shu Wei Tao. The other division was the Divine Division, which consisted of all of the special forces. These included mecha battalions, as well as personnel who were responsible for handling heavy artillery, defenses, and other areas of assistance. Even though there were only 2 divisions in the entire legion, each of the divisions had 5 corps, so they could be considered to be independent divisions. Tang Wuling had seen very few people in this base, but in reality, the entire Blood God Legion had over 25,000 people if all of the soldiers and logistical personnel were taken into account. They didn't have as many people as a standard legion, but all of them were the elite of the elite. Normally speaking, major legions like the Northeast Legion were each comprised of around 100,000 people. The fact that the Blood God Legion was known as a legion even with only 25,000 members was a testament to both their importance and combat abilities. Long Yakshu had told Tang Wuling in a very proud manner that if the Blood God Legion wanted to, it could definitely demolish any other legion in the Federation with ease. The harsh conditions and frequent battles here had honed the soldiers of the legion to be truly fearsome beings. The special service department that Tang Wuling had been assigned to was part of the Divine Division, but it wasn't under the jurisdiction of any of the 5 corps and answered directly to the control center. They worked alongside the legion's research department, and they would often undertake missions that couldn't be completed by battle units. Their duties were more dangerous in nature, so only the best of the best were distributed to the special service department. You've basically mastered all of the knowledge we currently have about abyssal creatures, and everything else will come to you through practical combat. During the rest of your special training, I'll take you to look at the battle tactics employed by our battle units. Even though you're currently a member of our special service department, you have to familiarize yourself with those tactics as well because you'll be joining a battle unit sooner or later. Learning about these things early on will be beneficial to your future development in this legion. Long Yakshu said to Tang Wuling. All right, when do we go? Tang Wuling asked in an eager manner. Long Yakshu replied, we'll go tomorrow. By the way, how's your forging room coming along? You better not disappoint me. I've invested my entire savings on you. Regular practice was very important in any craft. As a blacksmith, it would be extremely detrimental to Tang Wuling if he couldn't practice just because he joined the military. However, it was not easy to find a forging room here. The Blood God Legion was situated deep within the Sky and Mountain ranges, where all resources were extremely scarce. There were only 3 forging rooms in the Legion, and all of them were reserved for the blacksmiths, mostly for mecha repair and tasks of that nature. Tang Wuling had rather high requirements for his forging room. For example, he wanted the best forging bench, as well as all various types of support tools and a large enough space for him to operate. It was a good thing that he was carrying a good supply of uncommon metals. It was undoubtedly the case that the Blood God Legion wouldn't provide him with all of these things when he didn't have any accolades to his name, so he could only turn to this superior for his help. Long Yakshu had been very generous by offering her accolades and also using some of her connections in the Legion to organize this forging room for Tang Wuling. However, as opposed to requesting future interest repayments from Tang Wuling, she had asked to become an investor with 50% of the shares. Half of the accolades that Tang Wuling earns for his forgery had to be given to her. With how stingy Tang Wuling was, he normally wouldn't have agreed to something like this. But he was completely new here, and Long Yakshu was genuinely trying to help him. Furthermore, he could tell that she was actually thinking for his sake. He had no accolades at the moment, and she didn't want him to be indebted to her before he had any accolades under his belt. As such, her intentions were good, so Tang Wuling agreed to this partnership. Furthermore, Long Yakshu had a lot of connections that would grant Tang Wuling a steady stream of customers. Long Yakshu had also given their forging room a name. It was going to be known as the Long Tang Forging Room. Tang Wuling replied, the forging room is ready to go, boss. You can start bringing customers over now. I can do any job as long as it's related to forging, but the price is to be fair, and I only accept accolades. I'll leave it to you to decide on the prices for the jobs. Just base it on the difficulty of the job. Sure. Long Yakshu chuckled. Prior to the commencement of your actual military service, I'll get a few jobs for you so you can earn some accolades to spend. You're free this afternoon, right? I can get some jobs for you right away. Mecha repairs and weapons all have to be purchased using accolades. We can offer slightly lower prices than the Legion's repair rooms, and business will be booming for sure. By the way, are your forging skills really up to scratch? Tang Wuling guaranteed. I can definitely ensure great quality and speed, and I'll take as many jobs as you can bring to me. All right, then you can go and prepare. You have to earn enough accolades to feed yourself first. Long Yakshu began to depart as she spoke. Tang Wuling chuckled. Then you'll have to find some more jobs for me with my appetite. The two of them departed from Long Yakshu's dormitory room while enjoying a pleasant conversation before going their separate ways. Tang Wuling was preparing to go to his forging room to make some final preparations, but someone suddenly appeared in his way. Jiang Wuyu was standing in front of Tang Wuling with an unfriendly expression on his face. He had noticed that Tang Wuling had been visiting Long Yakshu's dormitory room every day for the past few days, and his sister had told him that Long Yakshu was just supervising Tang Wuling's new soldier training, but he still didn't like what he was seeing. There were many prominent families in the Blood God Legion, all of which had been part of the Blood God Legion generation after generation. These major families had extremely lofty statuses in the Blood God Legion. For example, the Long family that Long Yakshu hailed from had over 100 members in the Legion. Jiang Qiyue and Jiang Wuyu's Jiang family was also one of those prominent families, and the two families were very friendly with one another. Jiang Wuyu had always liked Long Yakshu ever since they were children. However, he almost constantly had a runny nose as a young man, and ended up with the nickname of Snotworm. Perhaps it was because of this that Long Yakshu had always been rather cold to him. Now that both of them were all grown up, Jiang Wuyu was becoming more and more eager to pursue her, but Long Yakshu was like an icy porcupine that he couldn't get close to no matter how much he tried. Tang Wuling was only a newbie, yet Jiang Wuyu had already caught Long Yakshu smiling at Tang Wuling 5 or 6 times, whereas he would sometimes go an entire year without being graced by one of her smiles. So he was naturally very jealous. Tang Wuling, Jiang Wuyu called out in a cold voice. Hello, superior. Tang Wuling stood up straight and extended a military salute toward Jiang Wuyu. Chapter 940. All right, no need for formalities. I'm speaking to you right now as a man, not your superior, Jiang Wuyu said in a serious voice. Tang Wuling didn't even have to use his brain to know why Jiang Wuyu was confronting him, and a wry smile appeared on his face. All right, what do you want? Jiang Wuyu cut straight to the chase. I'm challenging you to a one-on-one battle. If you win, I'll stay away from you, but if you lose, I'll... His voice faltered as he scratched his head with his brows deeply furrowed. Tang Wuling had thought that he would ask him to stay away from Long Yakshu if he lost. Jiang Wuyu murmured to himself, well, your choose not an object, so I can't just ask you to hand her over to me. Screw it. I don't like the look of you, so fight. I want to kick your ass. It's as simple as that. Do you dare to accept my challenge? Come with me to the combat rooms right now. Tang Wuling almost burst into laughter. This guy was adorably straightforward. Superior, I have to tell you something first. I already have a girlfriend. Superior Long and I are just friends, so it's not what you think. Secondly, I can let you beat me up even without retaliating, but you have to give me 100 accolades per punch. How about that? Jiang Wuyu faltered slightly upon hearing this. You already have a girlfriend. An enraged look then appeared on his face as he interrogated. You're not planning to take both of them at once, are you? Tang Wuling didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. It was really tiresome speaking with a man as straightforward as Jiang Wuyu was. All right, I'll fight you, superior, but we can't bet on the terms you proposed. We can't just have a casual fight, either. So how about we bet accolades instead? You can suggest a number. Jiang Wuyu raised an eyebrow in response. Accolades? You don't have any accolades to make bets with. Tang Wuling replied, I don't have any now, but that doesn't mean I won't have any in the future. I've been promoted to a second lieutenant as a newbie, and that's a testament to my potential. If I lose, I'll hand over the accolades after I earn some. Jiang Wuyu thought about this for a moment before agreeing. All right, I'll pay for the combat room rental fee, and I'll bet 1,000 accolades with you. Deal? Tang Wuling counted. 1,000? That's not a lot. 10,000 accolades were required for a promotion from second lieutenant to lieutenant. What did that equate to? Killing one 4-clawed bat was worth 10 accolades, so he'd have to kill 1,000 of them to earn 10,000 accolades. Meanwhile, each barn that was slain would yield 2,000 accolades. If there were multiple people battling together, the Blood God Legion had a designated system to split the contribution points among these people according to how much they contributed during the battle. 1,000 is still too little. You're just a newbie. You may not even be able to save up that much in 2 to 3 months. Do you want to lose everything to me down to your underwear? Jiang Wuyu grumbled. Tang Wuling had eaten 3,000 of his accolades in that one meal alone, and the thought of that was still making him wince even now. Tang Wuling said, all right, we'll go with 1,000 then. He didn't want to bully an honest and straightforward man like Jiang Wuyu, so he was going to let him off the hook lightly this time. Jiang Wuyu's soul power fluctuations suggested that he was a 6-ring soul emperor, and the only soul emperor who had ever been a troublesome opponent to Tang Wuling was Long Yue. As such, he was quite confident in his chances against Jiang Wuyu. Let's go. Jiang Wuyu was definitely a man of action rather than words, and he led Tang Wuling straight toward the living area of the Blood God Legion. The so-called living area was a cluster of large buildings that were all interconnected. They were designed to allow the soldiers of the Blood God Legion to relax, train, or have some fun when they weren't engaged in battle or undertaking missions. Combat rooms were naturally also included among these facilities. It was still morning at the moment, so there were very few people in the living area. Only a few soldiers who had been switched off guard duty were training or relaxing here. A combat room cost 50 accolades to be rented for an hour. Everything here cost accolades, and this was designed to encourage and motivate the soldiers of the Legion. Jiang Wuyu swiped the metal bracelet on his wrist in front of the door of the combat room, and 50 accolades were naturally deducted. Tang Wuling also had such a metal bracelet. It was known as a Blood God bracelet, and it had many uses. It could record the information of a soldier, and at the same time, it could record the accolades being earned while killing abyssal creatures. All of the expenditure within the Blood God Legion also had to be completed using these Blood God bracelets. On top of that, Blood God bracelets were linked to their respective wearers' bodily conditions, so if they were injured or fell ill, the control center would be notified right away, and treatment or assistance would be given as required. The combat room was quite spacious with a diameter of around 100 meters. It was quite a considerable undertaking to construct such large combat rooms in a world of snow and ice like the sky and mountain ranges. 50 accolades per hour was also quite a fair price, as even if other matters weren't taken into account, just the energy expended by the internal protective barrier was quite considerable. Jiang Wuyu took off his external garment before making his way over to one side of the combat room, and the internal protective barrier was activated. Tang Wuling also did the same as a cautious look appeared in his eyes. No matter what he thought of his opponent, he was definitely not going to underestimate them. This was a habit he developed over many years, and it was also a quality that all students of Shrek Academy possessed. Jiang Wuyu's aura had also changed. He had been adorably frank and straightforward just a moment ago, but now that he was about to engage in battle, he had adopted the demeanor of a fierce lion hunting down its prey. A serious look appeared on his face as he appraised Tang Wuling, and he yelled, "Are you ready? Ready as I'll ever be." Tang Wuling was standing on the spot in a very natural manner, but his eyes were fixed intently on his opponent. Ring. All of a sudden, a ringtone rang out from Jiang Wuyu's body, and an awkward look immediately appeared on his face as he held up a hand, and said, "Sorry, let me take this call first." "What's going on, Qiyue?" "Me. I'm just here at the combat rooms to spar with a friend." "What? You're coming over? This isn't anything fun, so don't bother coming over." All right, you win, princess. You can come over, but you have to keep this a secret." Jiang Wuyu hung up as a resigned look appeared on his face. Qiyue insists on spectating our match. I can't deny her because she might tell on me, so I'm sorry, but we'll have to wait for a while. Tang Wuling was rather amused by this. Despite his muscle-bound appearance, he seemed to be a little scared of his little sister. Not long after that, Jiang Qiyue rushed into the combat room, and her eyes immediately widened at the sight of Jiang Wuyu's opponent. "Are you serious, bro? You're challenging a newbie. Oh, I get it. You're jealous, right? But you can't be so heartless. What if you actually injure him?" Jiang Wuyu had been very straightforward with Tang Wuling, but he immediately blushed after his little sister exposed his intentions. "Pipe down, Qiyue. Don't worry, I'll be sure to hold back. Besides, he agreed to this. If you don't believe me, you can ask him. You agreed to fight my brother. I heard from Yakshu that you're pretty powerful, but my brother climbed all the way to his lieutenant colonel rank through battle. There's no way you're a match for him. How old are you? What's your soul power rank? My brother is touted to be the successor to Uncle Shu, the commander of the Blood Division." Jiang Qiyue's lips were like knives, and she was speaking very quickly. Tang Wuling said, "I agreed to this. Only through practical combat can I improve." Jiang Qiyue grumbled. "All right, you asked for it. If you agreed to this, then so be it. I'll be your referee." She made her way outside as she spoke. While passing by Tang Wuling, she whispered, "My brother's martial soul is the tyrant dragon, so you have to be careful. It's a very powerful martial soul that stands at the pinnacle of the power system. I'm telling this to repay you for letting me off the hook with that meal I promised you, so I don't owe you any favors now." Only then did she depart from the combat room. His martial soul was the tyrant dragon. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.